hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for March 9th, 2018. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. It's the weekend preview show today, Duane. But before we start talking about what MLS has in store for week number 2, there's more news coming out of Columbus by way of Austin for the Stadium of Austin. And when you were telling me something interesting, we're talking about the crew and what's not necessarily ideal for a soccer team in a Columbus situation where a stadium is about 4 miles from downtown Columbus. What can you tell us about the Austin situation?
Yeah. First off, thank you, Grant. As always, happy Friday. The Austin situation is getting more and more. It's like parody at this point. It's called McCalla Place. It's a city-owned facility in Austin that they've sort of gone through a checklist of locations that are in downtown, and we want to go here. And the city goes, no, there's baseball games happening there. And we want to go here. No, we want to put a park there. We want to go here. No, it's too nice. So they've gone to this place, McCalla Place, which is an underused strip of public land that they really haven't developed yet. It's 10 miles from downtown Austin, which is hilarious when you consider that the reason that they keep pointing to that they need to move from Crew Stadium. What's the sponsorship stadium? I can never remember the name of the sponsor.
Mapfre, which is a manufacturer of auto parts or something relating to the auto industry for sure.
All right, Crew Stadium, which is I like giving it. Yeah,
you like your stadium names, and they don't pay us to call it Mapfre Stadium, so yeah, I kind of agree with you. Crew Stadium. Yeah,
there you go. So Crew Stadium's 4 miles from downtown Columbus. This is 10 miles. So anyway, but the other hilarity to this is that what the site is the reason the site has become public land and they haven't developed it yet is that it had to lay fallow for a while because it's a former chemical dump. So
sure, that's a good idea. Let's have a contaminated field. How about we play and dodge a bit of chlorine on our pitch, or let's have some nice whiff of methane when we're playing. That's a good idea.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing, this continues to be such a, we laugh about it because it's so absurd, just the audacity of Precourt in this way. He makes this announcement 2 days before the Crew's home opener in Columbus. Can he derail it anymore? You'll obviously, here in Canada, we get to see that Crew's home opener live on CTV, of all things. It's TSN 4 and 5 and on CTV as well. But at any rate, it gets the Montreal Impact. So, look, I'll be curious to see what the crowd is for this. As I said, I was saddened to see that there weren't any Crew supporters. The Toronto game last week, typically over the years, the Crew would send a couple hundred up every game, and even there was a few trips where it was maybe only 20 or 30, but there was always a visible presence of them in the stadium, and I didn't see a single dot of yellow up there last week. So I'll be very curious to see what ticket sales and what the Nordecki is going to look like in this game, because I don't know what to do. We talked about this with Alicia. I talked about it on Sober Second Thoughts. I don't think there's a right answer. You can be like, okay, let's just support this to the bitter end, like Alicia did with Chivas, or you can be like, screw them. I'm not going. I'm not giving them a cent. And I get both sides.
I understand both sides as well. And the thing is, I'm not looking at the player aspect, because that still hasn't happened to the extent where, there hasn't been a fire sale yet. Yes, players like Ola Kamara were traded, but they were replaced with the Giassi Sardis. So there was some player personnel. So you can't say the Crew on the pitch are doing a fire sale or doing anything in the sports side to alienate fans. But having experienced this in Montreal for a lot of years, I know it's a different sport and it's a bit of a different situation here, but we're talking about the Montreal Expos in the early 2000s up until they moved in 2005, when they split their season with San Juan. And guess what? Montreal fans were not happy about it, and they were not even coming to Montreal games because this team was split about 2 markets. And it's a bit of the same idea. If you keep telling your fan, I want to do something else with your team, the immediacy of their lack of care for the team will take effect now. They won't care for the team. They'll be like, okay, well, I'll enjoy it while it lasts. No, they'll think, you're not getting my $150 this year just to make sure you have more money to move the team away. Like, I'm not going to help you with your fund to move this team, so you're not going to get my money. So I think it's a bit of that. It's a bit of it's asking a lot for supporters who might not have a team to travel, to continue to support the team, not just by buying the tickets, but financially by buying hotel rooms, by traveling, the cost of an away game. It's asking a lot of a supporters fan base to stay there. And then, like you mentioned, just before a home opener, just before a game, he continues, he doubles down and still talks about Austin. If I was Precourt or PSV as an entity, I would not even talk about Austin. I would do the work behind the scene, and I will try to be nice to Columbus as long as I can.
Yeah, he just doesn't care. Quickly, I'm curious. You would have been pretty young, but old enough to have been going to games by yourself by that point. By the time the Expos left, did you go to any games that final year?
No, the last 2 years I didn't go. And my grandma had season tickets in her entire life, and I did so, and I did too. And I used to go to 30 games a year with her. The last 2 years, I didn't want to go. No.
All right.
Why would I go? Why? Well, there's no reason. You're selling our best players. You keep one player that's good and you sell the rest just so we go see one player. No. So I can understand the feeling of Columbus fans.
I only went to a couple games a year. I went to a couple games in Montreal a year, a couple games to Toronto a year because I kind of grew up in between the two cities. Well, a little closer to Toronto, but nonetheless close enough to Montreal that we could get there fairly easily. Yeah, and I didn't go for about 3 years to the end, for sure. Although it did cross my mind on that final weekend. It's like, man, nah. And then it ended up, I think there was only like a couple thousand that showed up for the final series. It
wasn't the final series of the year. It was just a random series in the beginning of fall. And then they had like 3 more series, but in San Juan. So it's like they did it on purpose. All right. So we wouldn't have that send off, that final way. It was in San Juan, and it was quite sad. So I can only imagine if Columbus plays their last few games in Austin, right? It'll be the same situation, I bet. And you're like, yeah, not a lot of Columbus fans will be there.
Yeah, well, and look, I mean, not to belabor the Expos comparison. It's just one that we're both familiar with. But I think that there is some analogy there in the sense that you look at Montreal now as a market. When Toronto comes in, the Blue Jays come in to play those games. And you could imagine how much it takes a Montrealer to go out and watch a Blue Jays game, right?
At the Olympic Stadium, of all places.
Yeah. But they pack it because there is a latent baseball crowd there that misses it. And people like yourself that grew up with it and then lost it in their adult life once they hit that. And there's the older people that had it their whole life and miss it now. And I mean, I think that when you look at you don't know what you're missing until it's gone type thing. And I think that that goes both ways when it goes to the Expos. And I think it would go both ways with the Crew. I mean, this is a market that has a blue collar sort of aesthetic to it, that has that tradition back to the start of MLS. It's not a traditional NASL market, so it doesn't get credit for being an historic market. But within the context of North American soccer, it is. We talked about this a lot. It's just stupid to take a role. Like they're going into a market that's exactly the same in terms of size
or smaller.
It's a little bit maybe smaller. It has no proven history in soccer. What soccer history it does has been failure. And it's
the Aztecs, right? USL and a USL team. I remember the Aztecs, coached by Frank Yallop back then, folded a few years ago. There is some instances of failure in soccer in Austin. So what it is all worth. And the other thing I want to mention, just to finish the Crew portion of the show, I think we should have a bumper now. Like we had a turf bumper. I think to save the Crew needs a bumper.
Let's talk about Crew, baby.
Let's talk about Crew, baby. Let's talk about him and you. All right. But when you're looking at this situation, Duane, there's not just the surface. And that's something that I read on social media yesterday. It's a gentleman on social media took the time to do some research. He was wondering if MLS Twitter accounts, like at MLS and other Twitter accounts and other social media accounts, how the percentage of what team are talked to, what team are retweeted, what teams are basically given more of an audience, more of a platform, more of a push of marketing, but more on the social media side. And it's kind of weird. The Crew's been in the bottom of a few of those graphics for the last year and a half. So it does like drive the conversation, and if you don't talk a lot about them, they're not gonna. So it's like a vicious cycle who's pushing it? Are people not talking about the Crew? I mean, the MLS, the Twitter accounts and other, because they don't want to bring the situation up, or they're not talking about it because they want to not hype Columbus's side and not necessarily make marketing for Columbus, so they don't have great attendances, so it's easier to justify eventually the move. You know, there's a lot of chicken or the egg, and I'm actually asking myself that question, looking at graphics like this in the world the last 18 months in social media and in marketing and in Columbus itself or outside, and you're looking at this situation like, yeah, are the people not coming because they don't care, or they're not treated correctly? They're not necessarily given the same marketing and social media visibilities as others, so they're not necessarily aware of everything, so they don't care. So which comes first? And I thought that was an interesting thought process.
Yeah, well, it's the argument that women soccer fans will make that they don't get coverage in major newspapers, major media because there's not enough driving traffic to it. But is that because they don't get coverage, right? Like it's the chicken egg, as you said. Yeah. I found that interesting too in terms of the teams that were getting the least amount of push from MLS, their official accounts. And a lot of them made sense in terms of if you took a step back and sort of objectively looked at it. Like Vancouver was one of the high ones. Well, the Canadian teams always get the short stick, right? Because they're trying to drive their traffic and their audience in the United States. And so you get it. You have to talk about TFC a little bit. Montreal has gone through some turmoil, so that makes sense that they're going to get pushed up a little bit higher. Other teams in there that were getting a lot of attention were successful, like Seattle. Atlanta had such a great launch. Yeah, so it makes sense that they're going to talk about them a lot. And teams that weren't getting a lot of attention were teams that kind of were middling, like San Jose. But the Columbus was a good team last year. They're TFC's bogey team in many ways. I mean, TFC did end up winning the Trillium Cup for what that's worth, but they had all sorts of trouble from Columbus all year. I mean, Columbus beat them early on. They played them to a draw, and then finally TFC got the big win against them. But in the playoffs it was scrape and do for everything, and of course last week. So this is a good team, and they're not getting that push. So that's kind of surprising, Kevin.
No, it is. So we'll see what comes of it. We'll see if the stadium situation in Austin, like, can you just imagine the backlash if Columbus moves to Austin 10 miles away from Austin's downtown? And if you thought public transport was bad in Columbus, wait till you go to Texas.
Well, yeah, they don't believe in public anything in Texas. You have to ride your horse there or something. I don't know. I haven't been to Austin, so
maybe not. But yeah, it's going to be harder to get to your stadium. Anyways, we'll take a quick break. Any news that you wanted to touch before we move to the weekend preview?
There were a couple little things, but they weren't really major, so we'll leave it well enough alone. Just real quickly on the Austin thing, too, is that I've talked to people since this started to come out, and we all view Austin as like South by Southwest, right? Like cool, hip Austin. But anyone that's been there and spent time there says that this is kind of a city that isn't necessarily going to outside of the 3 blocks of hipsters. The rest of the city is just a typical Texas city. So this is it's just a dumb, strange sort of obsession that Precourt's got in his head that this is going to solve all the problems. Anyway, that's all I have to say. We talk a lot about this, and I think, as you said, we might as well get the bumper going because this is going to be a topic all year.
It's going to be the story of the year, as we predicted last week. We will be right back.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. Duane, tomorrow, it starts early here in the Eastern Conference. Columbus Crew, speaking of the Crew Stadium, are doing their home opener versus Montreal tomorrow at 1 p.m. And I have to say, I'm getting a bit nervous. This is not going to go well tomorrow afternoon.
Columbus is a pretty good team, as I said. So, I mean, look, in my predictions, I have them out of the playoffs. But as I've said a couple times, it's because I have this feeling that there's going to be players that either ask to be moved or they move them if that Austin move happens to go through. So
can they do a San Francisco? Can they pull a Delta? That would be amazing. Winning MLS Cup and then move into Austin. That would be awesome, right?
Yeah. I guess that would be something for sure. Look, there's a lot of great players on that team. Artura, as I mentioned last week, is a wonderful midfielder. You've got, it's a good team. It's a solid team. Their weakness is sort of at the back, just like Montreal's. But Montreal's exploring, finding itself. Montreal's
a new player joined Montreal this week. 36-year-old Rod Fanny, former player for the Olympique de Marseille in Ligue 1 in France. A player that's a bit older, but a lot of experience and brings some emergency help for the back line that was desperately needed in the center back position. And so will we see him start tomorrow? Maybe, maybe not. He's close fitness level-wise to playing. That's what Rémi Garde said. So we'll see if Rod Fanny makes his debut tomorrow, but that could be another interesting acquisition for Montreal. We'll see if it's what they needed. New England, Colorado. Are you excited about that game? Because, well, I don't think it's gonna grab the headlines. Let's put it that way.
Well, New England had both of its center backs red carded in his last match. They really have no one to play in the back. Colorado, apparently Colorado's in line to sign a TAM level striker as well. That's a report that came out today. So mention that quickly. There weren't any names mentioned, but certainly that makes sense. They need to. Just quickly back on the impact that the loan player that Montreal got it's not a loan. It's a temporary thing. So it will end in June, so just they're just sort of patch a hole.
It's basically a stopgap measure, and if he performs well, there's a discussion that's going to be had in June, and say, look, you want to stay for another 6 months, or be like, thanks, Rod. In Rod we trust. Now, see you next year.
Yeah, no, I mean that's 36, right? You're not going to take a long-term commitment on someone like that, but certainly it speaks to what they needed. But New England needs similar. And as I have been fond of making hyperbolic statements like Brad Friedel's the worst hire in Major League history, Major League Soccer since Aaron Venture. But, is it hyperbolic or is it observational? We'll find out. It's going to be interesting, too. There's a train wreck aspect to this New England Colorado game that I am interested to watch for sure.
Of course.
It'll be my second screen, but it should work out that because, just the way the timing works that Columbus, Montreal, because I can't imagine the Crew having a big pregame ceremony for their home opener.
It's gonna start pretty close to what? All right, let's kick off. Let's kick the ball.
Yeah,
let's get this thing started.
Yeah, one last game. Precourse got like a countdown thing, like those calendars you get at Christmas time where you get a piece of chocolate.
It's the Avant calendar for the Crew. 1 down, 32 to go.
There you go. That's pretty much what I think's happening there.
Is that a beer though? That should be a beer Avant calendar, right? You need a bit of adult beverages with all that's going on with the Crew, so that could be interesting. All right, let's move, Duane, to RSL and LAFC. LAFC, their second ever game, second on the road as well. Now traveling to altitude to RSL and to the Riots. Can LAFC be the first ever expansion team to win 2 game on the road to start the history? I'll go with no.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first rule of the early part of MLS season is to expect the unexpected, but I would really unexpect this. I don't know whether I will be putting any money on the LAFC this year. I find it interesting that on the official website they spell it out too. Los Angeles Football Club. It looks kind of weird. Anyway,
it looks very long too. It's a long name.
Yes. RSL didn't look as good as I would have thought they were going to look last week, but they were playing a decent side. We don't quite know what to expect for Dallas this year, so this will be an interesting game to watch. But LAFC last week against Seattle, after they got that goal, yeah, some of that's design, and they're going to play organized. I mean, I can't see them holding on much longer for that. And if Simon gets hurt, God help them. That team's in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Chicago SKC tomorrow as well, Saturday at 6 p.m. in Chicago. Which SKC will we see? That's the question, but it's an actual entertaining. Is that entertainment and interesting together? Yes, it is. And that is very entertaining.
and entertaining. Yeah, it's Chicago's first game of the year too. They were the team that had the bye last week, so obviously I'll be watching that one. Well, I mean, unfortunately, the non-Canadian MLS games that I'm most interested in on Saturday are both happening at the same time as the Canadian MLS team, so it'll be my second screen. But I am interested to see what the Fire look like this year, having had that sort of poor finish to the season. I just don't trust them, and I kind of want to see them for myself so that I can back up my don't trust plan beyond a simple fact. So SKC had a poor first week as well, losing in the home to a very good NYCFC team, but certainly an interesting game there for a while. Just anytime, finally we get to see our last team of the year. So that'll be something to watch there for sure.
Just 1 second. I just want to go back to New England for one tiny second, Duane. The Lee Wen situation.
Yeah.
Still not traded. Still not going to play. He's going to be benched until he's traded. Last week, he was not in the 18, and we all expected a trade to be happening very early in the week. Still hasn't happened. Apparently, there was a few club interested. Apparently, Montreal is one of those. Is the Lee Wen situation going to resolve quickly? Because if you are the Revolution, you don't want to press this. But if you are a team in need of a player, Lee Wen is one of those players that, well, if you got the money and the assets, go get him now, and he might be useful for you right now with your team. So, kind of surprised that it still hasn't been done.
Well, what I've been hearing is that they're really stubborn about it, and this is why he hasn't been moved yet, that they want something close to $1 million in allocation for him, and teams are going, well, he's not playing for you right now. We're not going to give you $1 million in allocation. So I think that's the dilemma here, and I can't help but think, not to belabor the Brad Friedel pile-on here, but I think this is part of it. He's being stubborn about this, and he wants to send a message or something like that. He's an old school, he's not English, but he was in England so long that he's pretty much English. So he has that kind of old school attitude that, I've got to play, flat lines and get stuck in, and the players need to be put in their place. I don't understand what they're doing with Lee. First off, I don't want to take Lee Wen completely out of the equation here. He's not a player that I would want on my team. I think that there's a history of problems following him around a little bit. I hate to do this analogy because he's a player that I enjoyed watching a great deal and is one of the reasons why I love Major League Soccer. But D-Row had a bit of that in him where he kind of everywhere he went, there was kind of contract disputes and everything else. I mean, he's holding out 2 or 3 times. He's demanding trades, things like that. Lee Wen has a similar history. And then you add sort of the unfortunate way that he left Vancouver, which involved him making a gay slur on social media. It's a player that I'm not too sure about, but maybe that's, maybe I'm judging too much on something that happened 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know, but certainly he's not blameless in this, I don't think. But that said, New England needs to move him. They need help. They need a lot of help, and this is an option to get some of that help.
Lee Wen, give me now 2 center backs. Here we go. Moving to Houston and Vancouver, first Canadian to play this weekend, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern Time in Houston, 3 p.m. Pacific. Vancouver Whitecaps, their first game on the road this year, traveling to hot and muggy Houston, Texas, to face Dynamo. I don't know if we'll see the real Vancouver, how they play. I think their win against Montreal was, showing some potential in the first half, but then showed that maybe fitness-wise and organization-wise, Vancouver is not where they want to be. But it's going to be the Davies show. The Vancouver Whitecaps will be as good as Alphonso Davies is this year, and that could be a very positive news because the kid is good. Kid's all right.
Yeah, the kid's okay. This is a measure game because I don't think anyone really knows where to put either Houston or Vancouver based on their play last week. I mean, obviously it's early times regardless, but you had Vancouver playing an Impact team, which is in transition, we'll say, right? That we don't quite know what's up there, and they were at home and
in discovery mode, right? When you get your new phone, it's like when you get a new phone, how long does it take before you're comfortable with it? Takes a few days, few matches, just to discover everything. That's where the Impact are, discovery mode.
Or like when you buy, a new EA Sports game and you've never played it before, and
tutorial.
You're in the tutorial mode trying to figure out how the controls work.
What? That's I can't do that. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, I don't really have a high-end video game system, but I bought NCAA football, and I'm like been playing the practice mode constantly. And why do I keep throwing the ball when I don't want to?
I thought it was a run play. I thought the guy was running with it.
I've been playing with Boise State. They're fun to play with. Anyway,
and they have a blue turf. They have a blue pitch. That's fun. Moving on now to Red Bulls Portland. And that game could be a cracker at Red Bull Arena.
Red Bulls haven't played in MLS as well either, but they obviously played in CCL, so we have seen them play this year. So that's why it's a little less interesting than Chicago. Portland was disappointing, to say the least, in their week 1 loss to LA. So that's our draw to LA. So that's something to watch there for sure. Portland was, of course, my MLS West pick. I do think there's a lot of strength there. There's a lot to like about this team. They lose to LA? Yeah, they lost to LA. I can never keep it straight which way they put their records on soccer.com. They do it the North American way. Anyway, I'm surprised the Red Bulls are playing this weekend. Both Seattle and Toronto have chose to take the bye week off to set themselves up. I'm guessing that has as much to do with New York not necessarily assuming that they were going to be playing in this round of CCL, whereas both Seattle and Toronto thought that they would be.
This is like Dallas not playing like this weekend. That's the fun part. Like, yay! When you have a week off in the league because you're in the CCL, but you lost in the first round.
Yeah, it's awful early to have a bye if you don't have a reason for it, too. But yeah, New York's playing. I'm sure that New York probably, do you want to play Portland instead? Like, we'll just flip. But unfortunately, you can't do that. So there you go. So
we'll see. That game's interesting tomorrow at 7:30. And there's one more game tomorrow night. No late game was on Saturday this week. But we do have a 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff in Orlando, Minnesota, at Orlando, the Orlando Stadium, to battle the Lions.
Yeah, Adrian Heath, of course, returning to Orlando for the first time since he left that, so there'll obviously be a lot of attention on that. He spent many years there, including some very successful years in the USL. Minnesota, they got their 2 goals last week, but how much of that was San Jose being bad and how much of that was them being good? Who's to say? Obviously, the 3 allowed. Same old problems when it comes to Minnesota, and they continue to be most people's pick for the worst team in the league. So we'll watch that one with interest for sure. I'm glad it's a standalone game. It'll give us an opportunity to really evaluate the way Orlando is going to play this year, because there's a lot of changes on that team that we need to sort of see play out.
And on Sunday, 2 games and 2 interesting games as well with marquee matchups. Atlanta United at home versus DC United. Which DC will it be? I don't know. Atlanta, can they bounce back after their trouncing in the first week? 4-0 to Houston. Can they recover in time? And the other game as well a bit later on at 5 p.m. Eastern. The now famous matchup, East versus West. City versus Prawling Center. Sun versus City, Cement versus Beach, New York versus LA.
This is otherwise known as MLS headquarters dream MLS Cup final is what this one is, especially in LA. But look, that's a hell of a matchup too, because LA is vastly improved, as a lot of people have said. New York City FC is some people's pick to win the Shield this year. Certainly the most common pick other than Toronto to win the Shield. So you're looking at 2 teams that are quite good, I think, and you're looking at a marquee matchup between the 2 coastal cities. The other game, Atlanta DC, is fascinating for another perspective, because both of those teams look pretty bad in week 1 at time. Well, obviously Atlanta looked horrific in week 1, couldn't defend to save their life, and DC United looked okay until they went up a man, and then they looked like crap. So it's just another.
It's always interesting to me when I see teams, like, they're an advantage. The other team loses a man. You're like, oh, wow, we're not prepared for this. We haven't prepared for that instance. And we don't know how to react. And we're actually worse than we were.
Yeah, well, it's because, I don't know. The theory is that when teams get down to 10, they play a little harder and they pack the middle a little bit more. And if you don't have the creativity to break them open, then yeah, you could be in trouble. You don't usually lose those games, but sometimes you can't win them, and it can be a bit of a telling situation. But you certainly, will be watching that one very closely, not for DC United, for Atlanta United, because that 4-0 loss in week 1 was like, how much of that is telling, like how much of that is predictive. They made a joke on Extra Time Radio that I'll repeat here, as Matt Doyle said that Atlanta United invented being an expansion team that has its expansion season in its second year, basically, because they had their struggles in their second year rather than
it was one game. It's one game,
which is why we'll be watching this one closely. But NYCFC LA is the marquee matchup of the weekend for 100% sure, for sure. All right, should we go ahead, Kevin?
And those will be interesting to watch
football
this weekend, so we'll keep an eye on those. And, there's a bit of Premier League as well, of course. We're not going to go through them now because MLS is what we focused on. But, yeah, soccer is back, Duane. It's we're back in 100% soccer mode. It took a few days after the Olympics, but I'm so excited for this season. It's going to be a fun time.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Yeah, we didn't really talk about the Wednesday games of the Champions League. Obviously, City had the big league going in, and sort of just sleepwalked their way through that one in the second leg.
But that Juve game though, that was Juve Tottenham game where Tottenham takes the lead. I'm like, oh man, and I'm gonna sit on my couch. I passed out for about 20 minutes. I woke up like, oh, this changed.
For sure, and that was a hell of a game. That made the whole round worthwhile. And I was watching that one I was watching that on my main screen. As I said, I put City on my phone and had the sort of sound in the background, and I perk up when I heard them raise their voice. But I was primarily engaged by that game, and it was a hell of a game. And I mean, I think that just speaks to, it was Buffon said after the match that Spurs, he felt that the only thing missing between Spurs and themselves was belief. That they, he's suggesting the narrative matters, that not to make the Spursy jokes, but that they get ahead and they don't necessarily believe that they're going to close the game. Whereas Juventus at halftime, apparently they said, look, this is a team that collapses, has a history of failing. They are outplaying us. And Buffon was clear about that in the postgame, that Spurs was the better team over 2 legs, but for 5 minutes, Juve got the job done, and that's a team that went to the final and has a lot of history. Real quickly, Kevin, I just, the Europa League, we're almost at the point where we can start to cover it a little bit.
So there's not 64 teams anymore?
Yeah, it's round of 16, and looking at it, first leg round of 16, just real quickly, Arsenal obviously in Milan was the marquee matchup of the round, and Arsenal got the 2-0 win over Milan. I joked that seemed like one of those like lower tier WWE pay-per-view retirement matches that's happening here. There's your wrestling reference for the day. Other winners, Atletico, which I think is the favorite to win this competition now. They seem to be rolling pretty well. They beat Lokomotiv Moscow 3-0. Leipzig 2-1 win over Zenit. Marseille 1-3-1 over Atletico Bilbao. Red Bull that's
Salzburg,
Red Bull.
Salzburg.
Salzburg, Redburg, because there's 2 Red Bulls.
But I saw the result yesterday. Salzburg beat the German team.
Dortmund, they beat BSB. That's an upset of the round there, but still in there. Lyon over Red Army. You have one draw in Lazio and Dynamo Kiev, and Sporting, which 2 goals for Freddie Montero. Interesting enough there, 2 over the Czech team there. So those are your winners of the first leg, and we'll pay a little bit more attention to the Europa League as it gets deeper into the competition. I think Atletico is most people's favorite to win this. Based on these results, no reason to doubt that after the first leg of the round of 16.
No, exactly. So it's an interesting time, and MLS this weekend. We'll be back on Monday for Soccer Today. Duane is going to watch the Ottawa Fury play the League One All-Stars today, and we'll have a report on Monday of which League One All-Star will become the next Leo Messi, right? That's what you're doing today?
Yeah, I'll see if I can get some audio. I'm no guarantee because I'm not going as a member of the media, but I'll track them down there and see if I can get some audio after that we can maybe run. But nonetheless, gonna enjoy that game. If you're listening to this live, it is at 12:30, 12:45 at the Ontario Soccer Center in Vaughan. So that's Martin Grove and Steeles, just a little bit north of there. It's a little difficult to get to by transit, but if you leave now,
you'll be there in time.
So there you go. All right, so I'm going to leave now. And on that note, Kevin, I'll say goodbye to the week, and you say goodbye to the show.
And we'll be back Monday for another edition of Soccer Today. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee, patreon.com/sportspodcast network. Beginning of April, we're starting our brand new Canadian-focused soccer show. It has a name that will bring you memories if you've been listening to us for a few years. And you can get that show when it starts on patreon.com only. It's for Patreon only. $1 a month goes a long way. Get it now while it's still open at patreon.com/sports podcasting network. And until Monday, as always, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.